I don't want to sit down, Miss Peterson. My back hurts. The teacher's eyes narrowed at the black teenager standing beside his desk. Sit down. Now. When Marcus tried to explain his pain, she physically forced him back into his seat. What the teacher didn't know. This 15-year-old was silently solving university-level mathematics while enduring her discrimination. But what happens when the principal discovers Marcus alone in an empty classroom, complex equations flowing across the whiteboard? Will anyone finally see his brilliance beyond the color of his skin? Dear viewer, if you are watching my story for the first time, I humbly request you write the location from where you are watching right now, subscribe this channel and press the bell icon now not to miss the notifications of my daily published new stories. Thank you, and let's dive into the full story. Marcus Johnson hunched over his desk, his pencil moving with quiet precision across the notebook. While the other students struggled with the basic algebra problem Ms. Peterson had assigned, he had finished it 20 minutes ago. Now, in the margins of his paper, he was working on something far more complex, a differential equation he'd encountered in a university-level textbook he'd borrowed from the public library. Time's up. Ms. Peterson's sharp voice cut through the classroom. Pass your papers forward. Marcus quickly flipped his paper over, hiding his extracurricular calculations. As the stack of papers reached the front, Ms. Peterson's eyes narrowed when she saw Marcus's submission. Mr. Johnson, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, I see you've once again decided to skip showing your work. She held up his paper. Just because you write down the answer doesn't mean you understand the process. But Ms. Peterson, I do understand. That's enough. She cut him off. See me after class. Several students snickered. Marcus felt his face grow hot but said nothing. This was a familiar ritual, one that played out nearly every day in advanced algebra. When the bell rang, Marcus remained seated while the other students filed out. His back throbbed from sitting too long, a constant reminder of that day 3 months ago. He stood carefully as Ms. Peterson approached his desk. Marcus, I don't know what game you're playing, but I won't tolerate it in my classroom, she said, dropping his paper on his desk. A red C- was circled at the top, despite every answer being correct. I'm not playing any games, Marcus said quietly. I just solved the problems differently. There is no differently in mathematics, Mr. Johnson. There's right and there's wrong. She turned away. And frankly, I'm not convinced you belong in this advanced track at all. Marcus waited until she left the room before looking at his graded paper. As usual, she had marked problems wrong that were actually correct, simply because he hadn't used her preferred method. He slipped the paper into his backpack and winced as another jolt of pain shot through his lower back. The classroom emptied for lunch period. Marcus stayed behind, relief washing over him as he finally stood up. Sitting for the full 50-minute period was excruciating, but he feared what would happen if he tried to stand during class. The last time he'd attempted it, Ms. Peterson had physically forced him back into his seat, causing the injury that still plagued him. Marcus approached the whiteboard, picked up a marker, and began to write. Here, alone in the empty classroom, he could work through the advanced mathematics that called to him like music. Complex equations flowed from his mind to the board, calculus far beyond his grade level. For these brief moments, the pain in his back receded as his mind soared through the elegant universe of numbers. What no one knew, what no one bothered to discover, was that Marcus Johnson wasn't just good at math. He was exceptional. A prodigy who had taught himself calculus and linear algebra from library books while his classmates were still mastering basic algebra. But in Ms. Peterson's classroom, Marcus was invisible. Or worse, he was visible only as a problem to be solved, a disruption to be controlled, a student who didn't fit the profile of mathematical giftedness in her narrowly defined world. Marcus, you're limping again, Geneva Johnson observed as her son entered their modest apartment. She set down the laundry basket she'd been carrying and approached him with concern etched across her tired face. It's nothing, Mom, Marcus replied, carefully lowering his backpack to the floor. Just sat too long today. Geneva's eyes narrowed. That's what you said yesterday, and the day before that. Let me see. Mom, really, Marcus Antoine Johnson, don't argue with me. Her tone was firm but gentle. Show me your back. Reluctantly, Marcus lifted his shirt. Geneva gasped at the fading but still visible bruise that spread across her son's lower back. How did this happen? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and fear. Marcus hesitated. I fell in the gym, he lied, unable to meet her eyes. Marcus. His mother's voice dropped to a whisper. We promised no lies between us. Not ever. The weight of that promise hung in the air. Marcus sank into a kitchen chair, wincing as his back protested. It was Ms. Peterson, he finally admitted. Back in February. I was having trouble sitting still because of a muscle cramp. She told me to stop disrupting class. When I tried to explain and stood up, she pushed me back down. Hard. Geneva's face darkened. And you didn't tell me? Or the school nurse? What would be the point? Marcus asked, his voice bitter beyond his 15 years. It would be her word against mine. And everyone knows Ms. Peterson is the star teacher at Westridge High. That doesn't give her the right to put hands on you. Geneva's voice rose, then she took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. We're going to the doctor tomorrow. And then we're talking to Principal Warren. No. Marcus shot up, then grimaced in pain. Mom, please. It'll just make things worse. Ms. Peterson already has it out for me. If we make a big deal about this. The next day, Dr. Simmons examined Marcus carefully, her experienced hands probing the tender area on his back. How long ago did this happen? She asked, her voice neutral but her eyes concerned. About 3 months, Marcus admitted. Dr. Simmons made notes in her chart. You have a minor contusion that's healed poorly due to continued stress on the area. Nothing's broken, but there's significant inflammation of the soft tissue. She looked at Geneva. How has he been sitting in school? He hasn't mentioned any accommodations, Geneva replied, looking pointedly at her son. Marcus, you shouldn't be sitting for long periods right now, Dr. Simmons said. I'm writing a medical note recommending standing breaks every 20 minutes, or a standing desk option if the school can provide one. On the drive home, Marcus stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Mom, please don't make this a big deal at school. Geneva's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Marcus, someone hurt you. That is already a big deal. But if you go in there talking about assault or pressing charges, they'll just close ranks. You know how these things go. Marcus turned to face his mother. Ms. Peterson thinks I'm stupid. That I don't belong in advanced math. If we make this about my injury, she wins. No one will ever see what I can actually do. Geneva was silent for a long moment. What do you mean, what you can actually do? Marcus, is there something else you haven't told me? Marcus hesitated, then reached into his backpack and pulled out a notebook. I've been working on some extra math. Geneva took the notebook at a stoplight and flipped through pages dense with equations she couldn't begin to understand. What is this? She asked. Calculus. And some differential equations. I've been teaching myself from library books. Geneva stared at her son, seeing him, truly seeing him, for the first time in months. Why haven't you shown this to your teachers? Marcus laughed, a short, bitter sound. Ms. Peterson already thinks I'm being disruptive by solving problems my way. Imagine if I told her I've moved on to college-level math while she's still teaching quadratic equations. Geneva handed the notebook back, her mind working. Okay, she said finally. We do this your way, for now. But Marcus, your light deserves to shine. We'll find a way to make them see you. Really see you. Marcus nodded, relief washing over him. But as he looked back out the window, he wondered if anyone at Westridge High would ever truly see past the color of his skin to the mathematical universe that lived in his mind. Principal Richard Warren was having a bad day. The school board was pressuring him about test scores. The cafeteria had somehow served fish sticks that were simultaneously burnt and frozen, and now his coffee had gone cold while he dealt with yet another parent complaint. As he walked the empty hallways during fifth period, seeking a moment of peace, he noticed a light on in room 217, Ms. Peterson's classroom. She should have been in the teacher's lounge for her planning period, so Warren approached cautiously, half expecting to catch students where they shouldn't be. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. A tall, lanky boy stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, completely absorbed in his work. The board was covered with mathematical equations that Warren, despite his years teaching science before becoming an administrator, could barely comprehend. They certainly went far beyond anything taught at Westridge High. The boy, Warren recognized him as Marcus Johnson, a sophomore, moved with fluid grace from one section of the board to another, his hand flying across the surface as he worked through what appeared to be complex calculus problems. Occasionally, he'd step back, contemplate his work, then dive back in with corrections or expansions. Warren stood silently, not wanting to interrupt. There was something almost sacred about the scene, a young mind in pure communion with mathematics, unaware of being observed, unburdened by judgment or expectation. After several minutes, Warren intentionally cleared his throat. Marcus spun around, his eyes wide with alarm. The marker clattered to the floor as his hand jerked in surprise. "Mr. Johnson, isn't it?" Warren asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, instinctively moving to stand in front of the whiteboard, as if to hide his work. "I'm sorry if I'm not supposed to be here. I needed to stand for a while, and this classroom was empty." Warren raised an eyebrow and gestured to the board. "And this is what you do when you need to stand? Differential equations that would challenge most college students?" Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Warren and the door, as if calculating his escape route. "It's okay," Warren assured him. "You're not in trouble. I'm just curious." He stepped closer to the board, examining the elegant mathematical notations. "Where did you learn this level of mathematics?" Marcus's posture remained tense. "Library books, mostly. And some online courses when I can get internet access at the public library." Warren nodded, then walked to the teacher's desk and casually leaned against it, trying to appear non-threatening. "And does Ms. Peterson know about your extracurricular studies?" A shadow crossed Marcus's face. "No, sir." "Why not?" Warren asked, genuinely curious. "This is remarkable work. Most teachers would be thrilled to have a student with your obvious talent." Marcus remained silent, his eyes now fixed on the floor. Warren studied the boy more carefully, noting how he shifted his weight frequently, as if standing in one position was uncomfortable. "Are you all right, Marcus? You seem to be in pain." "I'm fine," Marcus said quickly, too quickly. "Just a minor back problem. It's better when I'm standing." Warren's eyes narrowed slightly. In his 25 years in education, he developed a finely tuned radar for when students weren't telling the whole truth. "I see. And does this minor back problem have anything to do with why you're working on advanced mathematics in an empty classroom instead of showing your abilities in Ms. Peterson's class?" Marcus looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Then his face closed off again. "I should go. Lunch period is almost over." As Marcus began erasing the board, Warren stepped forward. "Leave it," he said quietly. "I'd like to study it more carefully." "Why?" Marcus asked, suspicion clear in his voice. "Because what I'm seeing here doesn't match what I've seen in your academic record," Warren replied. "And as principal, it's my job to understand why." Marcus hesitated, then set down the eraser. "It's just math, Mr. Warren. It doesn't mean anything." Warren smiled slightly. "You and I both know that's not true. Mathematics is the language of the universe, Marcus. And you seem to be remarkably fluent." He gestured toward the door. "Go get some lunch before next period. But I'd like to speak with you more about this tomorrow." As Marcus gathered his things, Warren noticed again how carefully the boy moved, minimizing certain motions as if to avoid pain. A suspicion began forming in his mind, one he didn't like at all. "Marcus," he called as the boy reached the door. "One more question. How long have you been having back problems?" Marcus paused, his hand on the doorframe. Without turning around, he answered, "Since February, sir." Then he was gone. Warren turned back to the whiteboard, studying the complex equations. They told one story, of a mathematical mind far beyond high school level. But his conversation with Marcus hinted at another story altogether, one Warren feared might reveal uncomfortable truths about his school. He pulled out his phone and made a note to pull Marcus Johnson's complete file, grades, attendance, disciplinary records, everything. Something wasn't adding up, and Richard Warren had always been good with equations. Principal Warren sat in his office, Marcus Johnson's academic file spread before him. The contradiction was stark and troubling. Marcus's standardized test scores were consistently in the 99th percentile for mathematics. His grades from his previous school showed straight A's in all math courses. Yet since transferring to Westridge High 7 months ago, his grades in Ms. Peterson's advanced algebra class had hovered around C-. Warren pulled up the digital gradebook on his computer and examined Ms. Peterson's assessment of Marcus's work. The pattern was disturbing: correct answers marked wrong, points deducted for insufficient work shown, comments about disruptive problem-solving methods. He picked up the phone. "Susan, please ask Ms. Peterson to come to my office during her planning period. And locate Marcus Johnson, I need to see him as well." An hour later, Diane Peterson sat primly across from Warren, her posture rigid with indignation. "You wanted to see me, Richard?" Warren nodded. "I have some questions about one of your students. Marcus Johnson." Ms. Peterson's lips thinned. "That boy is a constant disruption. Always finishing early, never showing proper work, challenging my methods." "Challenging how?" Warren interrupted, keeping his voice neutral. "He insists on solving problems his own way. Mathematics requires discipline, Richard. Students need to learn the established methods before they can branch out." Warren opened a folder. "I happened to see Marcus working independently yesterday. He was solving differential equations that would challenge most college students." He slid a photograph across the desk, a picture he'd taken of the whiteboard before it was erased. Ms. Peterson barely glanced at it. "Anyone can copy equations from a textbook." He wasn't copying. Warren leaned forward. He was actively working through proofs, making corrections, refining his approach. "This is original mathematical thinking, Diane." "With all due respect, Richard," Ms. Peterson's tone suggested no respect at all, "you're a former biology teacher. What do you know about advanced mathematics?" "Enough to recognize exceptional talent," Warren replied evenly. "And enough to question why a student with Marcus's abilities is barely passing your class." Ms. Peterson's face flushed. "Are you questioning my assessment methods?" "I'm questioning the discrepancy between his standardized test scores, his previous academic record, and your grades." Warren tapped the file. "I'm also concerned about a back injury that seems to be causing him significant pain." "I have no knowledge of any injury," Ms. Peterson said dismissively. "Really?" "Because according to his attendance records, he was present in your class on February 12th, but then missed the next 2 days. When he returned, nurses' records show he requested pain medication multiple times." "Students miss school for many reasons." "True," Warren agreed. "But I find it curious that his absence coincides with what he describes as a back problem that began in February, a problem that makes it painful for him to sit for extended periods." He fixed Ms. Peterson with a direct stare. "Diane, did something happen in your classroom that might have caused this injury?" Ms. Peterson stood abruptly. "I refuse to sit here and be accused of whatever you're implying. That boy has been nothing but trouble since he arrived. If he's claiming I injured him, it's a lie." "I never said he claimed you injured him," Warren noted quietly. In fact, he's been remarkably reluctant to discuss how the injury occurred. The color drained from Ms. Peterson's face. I need to go. I have lesson plans to prepare. One more thing, Warren said. I'm transferring Marcus to Mr. Chen's honors pre-calculus class, effective immediately. That's a junior-level course. I'm aware. I've already spoken with Mr. Chen, who reviewed some of Marcus's independent work and agrees he's more than qualified. Warren stood. And Diane? The school board takes allegations of physical contact with students extremely seriously. I suggest you reflect carefully on your teaching methods moving forward. After Ms. Peterson stormed out, Warren sank back into his chair, rubbing his temples. He hadn't wanted to believe that one of his most experienced teachers would physically assault a student, especially over something as trivial as standing during class. But Ms. Peterson's reaction had confirmed his worst suspicions. The question now was how to help Marcus reclaim his academic future without turning the boy's life into a public spectacle. And how to address what was looking more and more like a case of blatant discrimination against a brilliant young black mathematician. Marcus, please take a seat. Principal Warren gestured to the chair across from his desk, then noticed the boy's slight hesitation. Or would you prefer to stand? Standing is better, if that's okay, Marcus replied quietly. Warren nodded. Of course. I've been reviewing your academic records, Marcus. Your standardized test scores are impressive. You were in the 99th percentile in mathematics at your previous school. Marcus shrugged. I like math. Yet your grades in Ms. Peterson's class don't reflect that ability. Warren held up a hand as Marcus began to protest. This isn't about criticizing you. I'm trying to understand the situation. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Ms. Peterson and I just don't see math the same way. I think it's more than that, Warren said gently. Yesterday, I saw you working on mathematics far beyond high school level. Why hide your abilities? The silence stretched between them. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice barely audible. What's the point of showing what I can do if no one believes a kid like me could do it? A kid like you? Warren repeated, though he understood perfectly well what Marcus meant. A black kid from the east side, Marcus clarified, a hint of defiance entering his voice. Ms. Peterson decided who I was the moment I walked into her classroom. Warren leaned forward. Marcus, I want to be direct with you. Your back injury, did it occur in Ms. Peterson's classroom? Marcus stiffened. I don't want to talk about that. I understand, Warren said. But I need to know if a member of my staff harmed a student. What does it matter now? Marcus asked bitterly. It happened. Talking about it won't fix my back. Warren considered his next words carefully. What if I told you I'm transferring you to Mr. Chen's honors pre-calculus class immediately? Marcus's eyes widened. That's a junior-level class. Based on what I saw yesterday, you're ready for calculus, not pre-calculus. But we need to start somewhere. Warren smiled slightly. Mr. Chen was quite excited after I showed him a photo of your work. For the first time, a flash of genuine emotion crossed Marcus's face, a mixture of hope and disbelief. For real. For real, Warren confirmed. But Marcus, I still need to address what happened to cause your injury. Not just for your sake, but to ensure it doesn't happen to another student. Marcus looked down at his hands. I don't want to make a big deal about it. Sometimes, Warren said quietly, not making a big deal about wrong things is how they continue to happen. The school counselor, Ms. Rivera, knocked and entered the office. Warren had specifically requested her presence to ensure Marcus had proper support. Marcus, Ms. Rivera is here to help us document your experience, Warren explained. Anything you share will be kept confidential unless action needs to be taken for safety reasons. Marcus looked between them, then took a deep breath. It was February 12th. I was having trouble sitting still because my back was cramping from sitting all period. When I tried to stand up to stretch, Ms. Peterson told me to sit down. I tried to explain that I needed to stand for just a minute, but she came over and pushed me back into my seat. Hard. I felt something pop in my lower back. Ms. Rivera made notes as Marcus continued, describing how the pain had worsened over the next few days, how he'd been afraid to tell anyone, worried that no one would believe him over a respected teacher. Have you received medical attention? Ms. Rivera asked gently. Marcus nodded. My mom took me to the doctor yesterday. Dr. Simmons wrote a note saying I should be allowed to stand during class. Warren exchanged a glance with Ms. Rivera. Marcus, would you be willing to have Dr. Simmons share her medical assessment with the school? I guess so, Marcus replied hesitantly. But what happens then? Is Ms. Peterson going to get fired? Warren chose his words carefully. Our priority is your well-being and education. There will be an investigation, following district protocols. But Marcus, I want you to focus on your academics now. You have extraordinary mathematical abilities that deserve to be nurtured. As Marcus left the office with Ms. Rivera, Warren sat heavily in his chair. The situation was even worse than he'd feared. Not only had a teacher physically injured a student, but that injury had been allowed to persist untreated for months because the student, justifiably, feared he wouldn't be believed. Warren picked up the phone. It was time to call Geneva Johnson and the school board. This wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to right a serious wrong, and perhaps, in the process, help an exceptional young mathematician find his rightful place. Dr. Simmons's office was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioner. Geneva Johnson sat rigidly in one of the visitor chairs, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, Principal Warren reviewed the medical report with careful attention. This confirms what Marcus told us, Warren said finally. Dr. Simmons has documented a soft tissue injury to the lower back consistent with blunt force trauma approximately 3 months ago. The continued inflammation suggests the injury has been aggravated by prolonged sitting without proper support. Geneva's voice was controlled, but Warren could hear the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. My son has been in pain for 3 months, Mr. Warren. 3 months of sitting in that woman's classroom, being forced to endure physical pain while she belittled his intelligence and marked his correct answers wrong. Warren nodded, understanding her anger. Mrs. Johnson, I want you to know that I take this situation extremely seriously. What happened to Marcus represents multiple failures on our part, a failure to protect his physical safety, to recognize his academic abilities, and to create an environment where he felt safe reporting what happened. What happens now? Geneva asked. The district has strict protocols for allegations of physical misconduct by staff, Warren explained. Ms. Peterson has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. The medical report will be submitted as evidence. Geneva leaned forward. And what about Marcus's education? He's lost months of proper instruction because of that woman's prejudice. Let's call it what it is. Warren sighed. You're right. And I apologize for that failure as well. I've already transferred Marcus to Mr. Chen's honors pre-calculus class. Based on the work I observed, Marcus is operating well above grade level in mathematics. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dr. Simmons entered, her white coat crisp and her expression serious. Mrs. Johnson, Principal Warren, she greeted them. I wanted to discuss Marcus's treatment plan in person. Please, Warren gestured to an empty chair. Dr. Simmons sat, opening her tablet to review her notes. The good news is that with proper care, Marcus should make a full recovery. The injury isn't permanent, but it has been aggravated by lack of appropriate treatment and accommodation. She turned to Geneva. I'm prescribing anti-inflammatory medication and 6 weeks of physical therapy. Most importantly, Marcus needs to avoid prolonged sitting. He should be allowed to stand during classes, and ideally, have access to a standing desk option. We'll make those accommodations immediately, Warren assured them. There's also the psychological component to consider, Dr. Simmons continued. Marcus has been dealing with both physical pain and the stress of having his injury dismissed. I'd recommend he speak with a counselor. Warren nodded. Our school counselor, Ms. Rivera, has already been involved. We can arrange regular sessions with her, if Marcus is comfortable with that. Geneva looked between them, her expression softening slightly. Thank you both. But there's something else we need to address. She reached into her bag and pulled out Marcus's notebook. My son has been teaching himself college-level mathematics because the school failed to recognize his abilities. What are you going to do about that, Mr. Warren? Warren took the notebook, flipping through pages of complex equations, many similar to what he'd seen Marcus working on in the empty classroom. Mrs. Johnson, I owe you and Marcus another apology. This level of mathematical understanding should have been identified and nurtured from day one. He closed the notebook thoughtfully. With your permission, I'd like to arrange for Marcus to be properly assessed by the mathematics department at the local university. He may qualify for their dual enrollment program. Geneva's eyebrows rose. College classes? While still in high school? Based on what I've seen, Marcus is ready, Warren said with conviction. But more importantly, he deserves to be challenged and respected for his abilities. As they continued discussing options, Marcus waited outside the office, absently solving equations in his head to distract himself from the awkward looks of the receptionist. He hadn't wanted his mother to make a big deal about his injury, but after years of being overlooked and underestimated, a small part of him felt relief that adults were finally taking him seriously. When the door opened, Marcus stood quickly, searching his mother's face for clues about what had been decided. Marcus, Principal Warren said, extending his hand, I owe you an apology on behalf of Westridge High School. We've failed you in multiple ways, and for that, I'm truly sorry. Marcus shook his hand cautiously. What happens now? Now, Warren said with a genuine smile, we start making things right. Beginning with finding you mathematics courses worthy of your abilities. For the first time in months, Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders, and it wasn't just from the promise of proper treatment for his back. Marcus stood at the whiteboard in Mr. Chen's honors pre-calculus class, working through a problem on limits. The standing desk Principal Warren had arranged sat empty at the back of the classroom. Marcus preferred to work at the board when possible. Very good, Marcus, Mr. Chen nodded approvingly. Can you explain your approach to the class? 2 weeks had passed since Marcus's transfer, and the difference was stark. Where Ms. Peterson had seen only disruption in Marcus's mathematical intuition, Mr. Chen recognized and nurtured his talent. As Marcus explained his solution, he noticed Principal Warren and a stranger observing from the doorway. The stranger, a middle-aged black man in a tweed jacket, watched Marcus with particular interest, nodding occasionally. After class, Mr. Chen approached Marcus. Principal Warren would like to see you in his office. Nothing to worry about, he added, seeing Marcus's expression. In the hallway, Marcus overheard raised voices coming from Ms. Peterson's classroom. Despite being on administrative leave, she had arrived at school that morning, insisting on gathering personal items. This is utterly ridiculous. Ms. Peterson's voice carried clearly. You're destroying my career over the word of one student. Diane, this isn't the place, Warren's voice replied firmly. The school board has scheduled a formal hearing. That's the appropriate forum for. I know what this is really about, Ms. Peterson interrupted. You've always had it out for me. And now you're taking the side of that boy over a teacher with 20 years of experience. This is about a student who was physically injured in your classroom, Warren responded, his voice controlled but tight. A brilliant student whose mathematical abilities you not only failed to recognize but actively suppressed. Oh please. If he's so brilliant, why couldn't he follow basic instructions? Mathematics requires discipline and proper methodology, not showboating and shortcuts. Marcus froze, his hand on the office door. Behind him, the stranger in the tweed jacket cleared his throat. Young man, I believe Mr. Warren is expecting us inside. Marcus nodded mutely and entered the office, still rattled by Ms. Peterson's words. Even now, facing serious consequences, she couldn't see beyond her preconceptions. Inside, Warren introduced the stranger as Dr. Bryant from the mathematics department at State University. Dr. Bryant has reviewed your notebook and the work I photographed, Warren explained. He has a proposal for you. Marcus, Dr. Bryant began, your mathematical intuition is remarkable. You've essentially taught yourself concepts that most students don't encounter until their second year of college. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the praise. I just like solving problems. And that's exactly what mathematics is all about, Dr. Bryant smiled. I'd like to offer you a place in our dual enrollment program. You would take Calculus 2 at the university 3 afternoons a week while continuing your other courses here at Westridge. Marcus's eyes widened. For real? Like, actual college classes? Very real, Dr. Bryant confirmed. With your abilities, you could easily complete most of an undergraduate mathematics degree before you finish high school. As they discussed logistics, Marcus felt a curious mixture of emotions, excitement about the opportunity, vindication that his abilities were finally being recognized, but also lingering anger about the months of pain and dismissal he'd endured. When he left Warren's office, Marcus passed Ms. Peterson in the hallway. Her face hardened when she saw him, and she looked away pointedly. Marcus didn't look away. For the first time, he stared directly at the teacher who had caused him so much pain, both physical and emotional, and realized that her power over him was gone. In that moment, standing tall despite the lingering discomfort in his back, Marcus understood that sometimes victory wasn't about what other people admitted, it was about what you refused to let them take from you. Principal Warren sat across from School Board Director Patricia Alvarez in her office, a folder of documents open between them. This is serious, Richard, Alvarez said, removing her reading glasses. A teacher physically assaulting a student, then systematically undermining his academic performance for months afterward. I know, Warren replied. And I take full responsibility for not identifying the situation sooner. The medical report is damning, and the discrepancy in the boy's grades is impossible to ignore. Alvarez closed the folder. Ms. Peterson's union representative is already claiming we lack sufficient evidence and that the student's allegations are exaggerated. Warren frowned. Marcus didn't even want to come forward. He was protecting her, not the other way around. I believe you, Alvarez assured him. But we need to handle this carefully. The last thing we want is for that young man to become the center of a public spectacle. I agree completely. Warren leaned forward. Marcus is extraordinary, Patricia. His mathematical abilities are beyond anything I've seen in my career. Dr. Bryant from State University had him take an assessment yesterday. Marcus scored at the level of a second-year mathematics major. Alvarez raised her eyebrows. And Ms. Peterson was giving him C-minuses. While actively discouraging his natural problem-solving approaches, Warren confirmed. The psychological impact may be as significant as the physical injury. So what are you proposing? Alvarez asked. Warren took a deep breath. I want to make this right, but in a way that centers Marcus's abilities rather than what was done to him. We have our spring academic assembly next week. I'd like to highlight Marcus's mathematical achievements, with Dr. Bryant presenting a special recognition. And Ms. Peterson? The disciplinary hearing is scheduled for the following day, Warren said. By then, the entire school will have seen indisputable evidence of Marcus's brilliance. It changes the narrative from student accuses teacher to school recognizes exceptional talent that was previously overlooked. Alvarez considered this. It's unorthodox, but I see your reasoning. Have you discussed this with Marcus and his mother? Not yet, Warren admitted. I wanted your support first. You have it, Alvarez said decisively. But Richard, tread carefully. This young man has already been through enough. His well-being must come first. Later that afternoon, Warren met with Marcus and Geneva in his office. He outlined his proposal, watching their reactions carefully. A school assembly? Marcus looked horrified. With everyone watching. It's not about putting you on display, Marcus, Warren explained gently. It's about giving proper recognition to your abilities. Dr. Bryant would present you with formal acceptance to the dual enrollment program. You wouldn't have to solve equations in front of everyone or anything like that. Unless you wanted to, Warren added with a small smile. Geneva studied Warren intently. This isn't just about Marcus, is it? This is also about making a statement before Ms. Peterson's hearing. Warren nodded, respecting her perception. Partly, yes. It changes the conversation from one about alleged misconduct to one about recognizing talent. But I would never suggest this if I didn't think it was also beneficial for Marcus. Marcus looked doubtful. I'm not good with being the center of attention. I understand, Warren said. But consider this, how many other students might there be at Westridge whose talents are being overlooked? Your recognition could open doors for others. Marcus glanced at his mother, then back at Principal Warren. Can I think about it? Of course, Warren agreed. But we would need to know by Friday to make the arrangements. As they left the office, Geneva squeezed her son's shoulder. It's entirely your decision, Marcus. Don't let anyone pressure you. Marcus nodded, lost in thought. The idea of standing on stage in front of the entire school terrified him. But something else Warren had said resonated deeply, the possibility that his example might help other students whose talents were being dismissed or overlooked. That night, as he worked through differential equations in his notebook, Marcus thought about all the other students who might be hiding their abilities, afraid of standing out, of being disbelieved, of being seen as disruptive, for thinking differently. By morning, he had made his decision. But he had one condition of his own, one that would transform Warren's ceremonial recognition into something far more dramatic. The Westridge High School auditorium buzzed with the restless energy of 800 teenagers who had no idea why they'd been called to a special assembly. On stage, Principal Warren adjusted the microphone, flanked by Dr. Bryant from State University and several members of the school board. In the front row, Geneva Johnson sat straight-backed and dignified, her eyes fixed on the stage. Beside her, an empty seat awaited Marcus, who was in a side room preparing himself for what was to come. Settle down, everyone, Warren called, and the murmuring gradually subsided. Thank you for your attention. We're here today for a special recognition. Warren paused, scanning the audience. At Westridge High, we pride ourselves on academic excellence. But sometimes, exceptional talent can be overlooked. Today, we're rectifying such an oversight. In the wings, Marcus paced nervously, his palms sweaty. Mr. Chen stood beside him, offering quiet reassurance. You don't have to do this, Mr. Chen reminded him. The recognition alone would be enough. Marcus shook his head. No, it wouldn't. Not for me, and not for anyone else who's been silenced. On stage, Warren continued. I'd like to introduce Dr. James Bryant, Chair of Mathematics at State University. Dr. Bryant stepped forward. Thank you, Principal Warren. I'm here today because I recently had the privilege of meeting a young mathematician of extraordinary ability, a sophomore here at Westridge who is performing at the level of a second-year university mathematics major. A murmur ran through the audience. In the second row, Ms. Peterson's substitute teacher leaned forward with interest. It is my great pleasure, Dr. Bryant continued, to announce that Westridge student Marcus Johnson has been accepted into State University's prestigious dual enrollment program for gifted mathematics students. The audience applauded politely, many students looking around in confusion, trying to place who Marcus Johnson was. Warren returned to the microphone. I'd like to invite Marcus to the stage. Marcus took a deep breath and walked out from the wings. He heard a few whispers of surprise as he crossed to center stage. He knew what they were seeing, a quiet black kid from Ms. Peterson's class who rarely spoke up. Thank you, Principal Warren, Dr. Bryant, Marcus said, his voice initially soft but growing stronger as he continued. Before I accept this recognition, I'd like to demonstrate why mathematics matters to me. This was the condition Marcus had insisted on, not just to be recognized, but to be seen for what he could do. He turned to the large whiteboard that had been set up at his request. Taking a marker, he began to write, explaining as he worked. This is a partial differential equation that describes how heat moves through material over time. His marker flew across the board with confident precision. It's usually taught in advanced calculus, but I taught myself by reading library books after school. The auditorium had fallen completely silent. Even the usual whispers and shuffling had ceased as students watched, transfixed by the fluid grace with which Marcus filled the board with complex mathematics, explaining concepts many of them had never heard of with remarkable clarity. In the audience, Geneva Johnson's eyes shone with unshed tears of pride. Beside her, several teachers exchanged looks of amazement. After several minutes of demonstration, Marcus set down the marker and turned back to face the audience. His voice was steady now, infused with the confidence that came from speaking his mathematical truth. "I've loved mathematics my entire life," he said. "It's a universal language that transcends barriers. But for months at this school, I hid what I could do because I was afraid of being seen as disruptive for thinking differently." Marcus looked directly at Principal Warren, who nodded encouragingly. "I'm standing here today because Principal Warren happened to find me working on equations in an empty classroom. He took the time to see me, really see me, for who I am and what I can contribute." Marcus paused. Every student deserves that kind of recognition, regardless of what they look like or where they come from. The applause began slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation as students and teachers rose to their feet. Dr. Bryant stepped forward, shaking Marcus's hand vigorously before presenting him with an official letter of acceptance to the dual enrollment program. As the applause continued, Principal Warren moved to the microphone. "Thank you, Marcus, for that extraordinary demonstration. I want to add one more announcement. Starting next week, Westridge High will be implementing a new academic mentorship program designed to identify and nurture special talents that might otherwise go unrecognized." The assembly concluded with another round of applause. As students filed out, Marcus found himself surrounded by classmates who had never spoken to him before, now asking questions about his mathematical interests, congratulating him, seeing him for the first time. In the back of the auditorium, unnoticed by most, Ms. Peterson stood with her union representative, having arrived to observe the proceedings. Her face was ashen as she watched her former student, the boy she had dismissed, injured, and belittled, receive recognition she had been unable to imagine him deserving. Tomorrow would bring her disciplinary hearing. But today, the narrative had already been irrevocably changed by a young mathematician who had finally been given the space to speak his truth through the elegant language of equations. The buzz from the assembly didn't die down as students crowded the hallways, their voices animated with discussion about what they'd just witnessed. Marcus found himself at the center of attention for the first time in his academic life, surrounded by classmates who suddenly wanted to know more about him. "Dude, how did you learn all that college-level stuff? Could you tutor me? I'm barely passing algebra. Why didn't you ever say anything in Peterson's class?" The last question came from Jasmine, a quiet girl who had sat 2 rows behind Marcus in advanced algebra. Unlike the others, her question wasn't asked with excitement but with genuine curiosity. Before Marcus could respond, Principal Warren appeared, gently dispersing the crowd. "Give Mr. Johnson some space, please. He'll have plenty of time to discuss mathematics with all of you later." As the students reluctantly moved away, Warren turned to Marcus. "There's someone who would like to meet you. He was quite impressed by your demonstration." Warren led Marcus back to the auditorium, where an elderly man with silver hair and keen eyes waited near the stage, examining Marcus's equations on the whiteboard. "Marcus, this is Dr. Elijah Montgomery, Professor Emeritus of Mathematics at MIT. He happened to be visiting Dr. Bryant today and decided to attend our assembly." The distinguished mathematician extended his hand. "Young man, I've been teaching mathematics for over 50 years, and I've rarely seen such intuitive understanding in someone your age." Marcus shook his hand, momentarily speechless. Dr. Montgomery was a legend, author of textbooks Marcus had devoured at the library, contributor to major breakthroughs in applied mathematics. "Your approach to the heat equation was particularly interesting," Dr. Montgomery continued, gesturing to the board. "This alternative derivation you've sketched here, have you published it anywhere?" "Published?" Marcus repeated, confused. "No, sir. That's just how I worked it out when I was reading about thermodynamics." Dr. Montgomery's eyebrows rose. "You developed this independently?" He turned to Dr. Bryant. James, this young man has essentially rediscovered the Montgomery-Chin variation, but with an elegant simplification I hadn't considered. Dr. Bryant studied the equations with renewed interest. You're right, Elijah. This is publication-worthy work. Marcus felt his heart racing. What does that mean? It means, Dr. Montgomery said warmly, that what you've been doing alone in empty classrooms and in your notebook at home isn't just practicing mathematics, you've been advancing it. A crowd had begun to gather as the three mathematicians discussed the equations. Teachers from the math department, students from advanced classes, even a few curious administrators all watched as Dr. Montgomery walked Marcus through the implications of his work. Ms. Rivera, the school counselor, sidled up beside Geneva. I've never seen anything like this, she whispered. He's discussing mathematics as a peer with one of the field's most respected scholars. Geneva nodded, her eyes never leaving her son. Marcus has always had this inside him. He just needed someone to look past their preconceptions and really see him. By the time Dr. Montgomery finished his analysis, the implications were clear to everyone present. Marcus Johnson wasn't just a talented student who could learn advanced mathematics quickly. He was a mathematical thinker with the potential to make significant original contributions to the field. Principal Warren, Dr. Montgomery said, addressing the administrator directly, you have an exceptional young mathematician in your school. The dual enrollment program is a good start, but I'd like to propose something more comprehensive. He outlined a specialized program that would combine advanced coursework at the university with independent research under his personal mentorship. With proper guidance, there's no telling what contributions Marcus might make to the field. I'd be honored to help direct his development. As the discussion continued, Marcus caught sight of Ms. Peterson standing at the back of the auditorium, her expression unreadable. For a moment, their eyes met across the room. Marcus didn't look away. Neither did she. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, the injury to his back was still healing, the months of dismissal and discouragement still fresh. But Marcus realized that Ms. Peterson no longer held any power over his future. What she thought of him, what anyone thought of him, paled in comparison to what he knew about himself. Dr. Montgomery's voice brought Marcus back to the present. What do you think, young man? Would you be interested in such an arrangement? Marcus looked from Dr. Montgomery to his mother, then to Principal Warren. Yes, he said, his voice steady and clear. I would like that very much. As he shook hands with the renowned mathematician, sealing a mentorship that would shape his future, Marcus understood that today marked not just a personal vindication but a public revelation. The equations he had written on the board had spoken a truth about him that no prejudice or preconception could erase. His mathematical voice had finally been heard. The school board hearing room was quiet except for the occasional rustle of papers. 5 board members sat at a long table, their expressions serious as they reviewed the evidence before them. At a smaller table to the right, Ms. Peterson sat with her union representative and attorney. To the left, Principal Warren sat beside the school district's legal counsel. Patricia Alvarez, the board director, called the hearing to order. We're here to address allegations of misconduct against Ms. Diane Peterson, mathematics teacher at Westridge High School. The specific allegations include inappropriate physical contact with a student resulting in injury, and subsequent discriminatory grading practices. Ms. Peterson's attorney leaned forward. My client has been an exemplary educator for over 20 years. She categorically denies any inappropriate physical contact with the student in question. We have significant evidence to the contrary, Alvarez replied calmly. Including medical documentation confirming an injury consistent with the student's account, and a troubling pattern of grade manipulation that appears targeted. The hearing proceeded methodically. Principal Warren presented Marcus's graded work, showing numerous instances where correct answers had been marked wrong, compared with similar work from other students that had been marked correct. The school nurse testified about Marcus's frequent requests for pain medication. Dr. Simmons presented her medical findings via video conference. Throughout it all, Ms. Peterson sat rigid in her chair, her expression alternating between indignation and disbelief. When it was her turn to speak, she stood, smoothing her skirt nervously. I have devoted my life to teaching mathematics with rigor and discipline. Marcus Johnson consistently refused to follow established problem-solving methodologies, creating disruption in my classroom. Ms. Peterson, Alvarez interrupted, we witnessed Mr. Johnson's mathematical abilities yesterday at the school assembly. Dr. Elijah Montgomery, a world-renowned mathematician, characterized his approach as innovative and publication-worthy. How do you reconcile that assessment with your claim that his methods were inappropriate? Ms. Peterson faltered. I was unaware of the extent of his abilities. Because you never looked, Warren said quietly. That's unfair. Ms. Peterson protested. I treat all my students equally. Do you? Alvarez pressed, sliding a chart across the table. This analysis shows a statistically significant pattern of lower grades for students of color in your classes over the past 5 years, even when controlling for standardized test scores. The room fell silent as the implications of the data sank in. As for the physical incident, Alvarez continued, we have the medical report, consistent testimony from the student, and notably, your own shifting explanations. Ms. Peterson's attorney requested a brief recess, during which Marcus and his mother arrived, having been asked to join for the final portion of the hearing. When the proceedings resumed, Ms. Peterson's demeanor had changed. The defiance had drained from her posture, replaced by a resigned weariness. I'd like to amend my earlier statement, she said quietly. I did place my hands on Marcus Johnson to direct him back to his seat. I did not intend to cause injury, but I acknowledge that my actions were inappropriate and unprofessional. She turned slightly toward Marcus, though she didn't quite meet his eyes. I also acknowledge that I may have allowed preconceptions to influence my assessment of his mathematical abilities and approaches. The admission hung in the air, neither full apology nor complete denial, but the closest to accountability that Ms. Peterson seemed capable of offering. After a brief deliberation, the board delivered its decision. Ms. Peterson would be suspended without pay for the remainder of the school year. She would be required to complete comprehensive training on implicit bias, modern mathematical pedagogy, and appropriate classroom management before being considered for reinstatement. As people began gathering their materials, Ms. Peterson approached Marcus and Geneva, her attorney hovering anxiously nearby. I never meant to hurt you, she said, addressing Marcus directly for perhaps the first time. I was trying to maintain order in my classroom. Marcus met her gaze steadily. The order you wanted to maintain didn't have room for someone like me. Ms. Peterson had no response to that simple truth. With a small nod, she turned and left the room, her career and reputation fundamentally altered. Outside the building, Dr. Bryant was waiting with news about Marcus's university schedule. As they discussed logistics, Principal Warren approached Geneva. Mrs. Johnson, I want to apologize again for what Marcus experienced at our school. The board has approved additional resources for teacher training and for the new mentorship program I mentioned at the assembly. Geneva nodded. It's a start. But the real change happened because my son refused to make himself smaller to fit into someone else's limited vision. Warren couldn't argue with that. As he watched Marcus animatedly discussing mathematics with Dr. Bryant, Warren reflected on how close the school had come to losing an extraordinary mind, not through dramatic exclusion, but through the quiet, insidious process of a student being systematically unseen. The consequences for Ms. Peterson were significant but relatively straightforward. The more profound reckoning facing Westridge High School was how many other students might be hiding their light, afraid of being deemed disruptive for shining too brightly in ways that challenged convention. 3 months later, Marcus stood at the front of a classroom in Westridge High School. The room looked different now. Standing desks had been added as options for any student who wanted them, and the traditional rows had been rearranged into collaborative clusters. A large sign on the wall read, Mathematics, Many Paths, One Destination. So that's how you can approach this type of problem, Marcus concluded, capping his marker after demonstrating an alternate solution method. Any questions? Hands shot up across the room. Marcus called on a freshman girl who had been watching his demonstration with particular intensity. But Ms. Peterson always said we have to use the standard algorithm, she said. Won't we lose points on the test if we do it your way? Marcus smiled. That's a great question, Zoe. The new policy is that any valid mathematical approach is acceptable, as long as you can explain your reasoning. Different minds work in different ways, and that diversity of thinking is actually a strength in mathematics. This was the student mathematics mentorship program that Principal Warren had instituted following the events of that pivotal spring. Twice a week, Marcus returned from his university classes to lead this special session for students who wanted to explore mathematics beyond the standard curriculum. As the students packed up their materials, Marcus caught sight of Principal Warren observing from the doorway. "You're a natural teacher," Warren commented as the students filed out. "How are the university courses going?" "Challenging in the best way," Marcus replied. "Dr. Montgomery is pushing me to publish that variation on the heat equation in an undergraduate journal." Warren nodded, genuinely pleased. "And how's the back?" "Much better," Marcus said. "The physical therapy worked wonders. I still prefer standing, though." They walked together toward the main office, where several new plaques had been added to the wall. One displayed the school's revised mission statement, with specific language about recognizing and nurturing diverse talents and learning approaches. Another announced the Marcus Johnson Scholarship for Mathematical Innovation, endowed by an anonymous donor, widely rumored to be Dr. Montgomery, to support students pursuing non-traditional approaches to STEM fields. The school board was impressed by the mentorship program, Warren mentioned. They're considering expanding it to other subject areas next year. That would be awesome, Marcus agreed. Every field has students whose talents get overlooked because they don't fit the expected mold. As they turned a corner, they nearly collided with a woman heading in the opposite direction. It took Marcus a moment to recognize Miss Peterson. She looked different, her posture less rigid, her expression less severe. She had been reinstated at the start of the new school year after completing her required training, though she now taught introductory algebra rather than advanced courses. The three of them stood awkwardly for a moment. Then Ms. Peterson spoke. "Your mentorship program is making quite an impact," she said to Marcus. "I've noticed several of my students gaining confidence after attending your sessions." "I'm glad to hear that," Marcus replied, surprised by her comment. "I'm still learning," Ms. Peterson added, a hint of humility in her voice that would have been unimaginable 6 months earlier. The training courses were enlightening. With a nod to Principal Warren, she continued on her way. Marcus watched her go, reflecting on how much had changed, not just for him, but for the entire school culture. Later that afternoon, as Marcus gathered his things to head to his university differential equations class, he paused at the whiteboard in room 217, the same room where Principal Warren had discovered him working alone all those months ago. The board was now filled with equations from the mentorship session, multiple solution approaches displayed side by side. Marcus added one final equation to the board, the elegant mathematical expression that had changed the course of his life. Below it, he wrote, "Never hide your light. The world needs your unique perspective." As he stepped back to view his handiwork, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction. His back had healed. His mathematical abilities were being nurtured by mentors who valued his innovative approaches. And most importantly, through his example and his teaching, other students were finding the courage to show their true capabilities. Principal Warren had seen a black student solving higher-grade equations on a whiteboard in an empty classroom and taken him in front of the whole school to declare his brilliance. But the true revelation wasn't just Marcus's mathematical talent, it was the realization that every student deserved to be truly seen, not through the lens of preconception, but for the unique gifts they brought to the world. As Marcus headed out the door toward his future, he stood tall, in every sense of the word. Dear friend, every student deserves to be truly seen, not through the lens of prejudice or preconception, but for their unique gifts and potential. This story reminds us that brilliance comes in all forms and from all backgrounds, often hiding in plain sight because society has failed to create spaces where it can safely shine. If this message resonated with you, please like this video to help spread this important reminder of how a single person who truly sees someone can change the trajectory of a life forever. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge us to look beyond our assumptions and recognize the extraordinary in everyone around us.